When you picture a peacock, what leaps into your mind? Is it that incredible shimmering fan, right? That dazzling, iridescent display?
Almost certainly.
Yeah. And for centuries, this bird has been held up as the perfect example, the absolute paragon of a major scientific theory, sexual selection. But what if the iconic image we've held onto for so long isn't quite the whole story? Our mission in this deep dive is to truly unpack decades of scientific investigation into how peacocks actually behave.
Right.
We're going beyond those long-held assumptions and diving into what was actually observed in the wild and in controlled studies. And I have a feeling you're going to find some of the truths we uncover pretty surprising, especially how they challenge conventional wisdom about evolution and, well, animal behavior.
It's astonishing, isn't it? I mean, even though the peacock was famously Darwin's poster boy for sexual selection theory, by about 1980, there was this huge knowledge gap.
Right.
Yeah, we literally knew almost nothing about how these males actually use their massive trains, which, just to be clear for everyone, are those elaborate tail coverts on their lower back, not their actual tails.
Okay, good clarification.
And even more critically, we had no real idea how the females, the peahens, responded to these elaborate displays. For such an emblematic creature, the actual evidence was, well, pretty much a blank slate.
That's incredible to think about. So let's unpack this. For so long, conventional wisdom, even found in respected bird books, claimed a successful peacock maintained a harem of females. This painted a picture of constant guarding, a male monopoly on mating, much like you see with, say, red deer or elephant seals. But looking at a peacock, doesn't that idea just feel a bit off?
It absolutely does, yeah. The harem-defending male in the animal kingdom is typically large, often armed with tusks or antlers, right?
Yeah.
And constantly engaged in aggressive vigilance.
Kind of fighting off rivals.
Exactly. That big train of decorated feathers doesn't exactly scream harem guard. It just, it didn't align with the hard work of constantly fending off rivals or protecting females.
The look didn't match the job description.
Precisely. Their appearance seemed to contradict the very behavior they were assumed to exhibit.
And the earliest cracks in this conventional wisdom were almost like incidental observations, weren't they?
That's right.
There was a brief remark from the writer Desmond Morris, who noticed that far from chasing each other away, peacocks seemed to gather socially to display.
Which is the opposite of harem defense.
Exactly. Then a biologist named Kumar Sharma noted a very loose connection between the sexes during breeding season.
Yeah, another little hint.
These were the first whispers, that the long-held harem theory might not be accurate. The real breakthrough observation came in 1982. Imagine this. You're sitting in an arboretum near Oxford, just watching freely living peafowl. It became almost immediately strikingly clear. There was no mate guarding at all. The females were doing their own thing, wandering freely, choosing their own path. But the males, they remained clumped loosely together, each fiercely defending his own small patch of ground.
So territorial, but not over females.
Right. They'd display frantically if a female approached, but made no attempt to follow her if she left. However, they were intensely territorial, aggressive towards each other within their patches. That's a huge shift in behavior from what was assumed.
That was the aha moment, the key insight. What they were looking at definitively was a lek.
A lek?
For our listeners, a lek is essentially a fixed arena where males congregate in small territories solely for display purposes, attracting free-roving females.
So like a singles bar for birds.
Kind of. And it's fascinating because the central, more senior territories within these leks are often smaller and more hotly contested. And as you noted, the aggression is directed inwards, male on male, for prime real estate, not outwards towards females.
So it's about showing off to other males and females.
It's a display for dominance among themselves to then attract the females, yeah.
That initial discovery was then quickly confirmed in other locations, right? Like at Whipsnade Zoo.
Exactly. Free-living peafowl males at Whipsnade aggregated in specific paddocks, each with his own small display territory.
And then in the wild, too, in India.
Yes, later in the wild in western India, often in these sort of semi-domesticated settings around villages or palaces where peafowl are quite tame, the exact same leak pattern was observed, and then reinforced by follow-up studies, like one from Nigella Hilgarth.
Okay.
Yes, and perhaps the most compelling validation came from Shala Yasmin and HSA Yahya near Aligarh Fort in India. They did a 7-year study.
7 years?
Yeah, of a wild but habituated population. and it showed a classic leak pattern with highly skewed mating success. We're talking one male achieving 10 matings, while others had few or none.
Wow, really skewed.
Very skewed. What's more, their findings show that the most successful males had the longest trains and the most frequent calls. This, they concluded, truly vindicated Darwin, showing sexual selection in action, clearly favoring the most flamboyant.
So, if they're not guarding harems, that raises the obvious question. What are peacocks doing with that spectacular train?
Right.
And the answer, it turns out, is pure showmanship, a performance for a very specific audience. A male spreads his train into that full, magnificent fan only when a peahen approaches. Sometimes he'll even initially turn away, almost to tease, before suddenly spinning around to envelop her in what's been called the full Technicolor radar dish effect, shivering all those feathers as he does so.
That shimmering effect.
Yeah. This behavior, you can see, is plainly about seduction. It has nothing to do with intimidating other males.
And the observational data confirm this beyond a doubt.
Yeah.
A male was twice as likely to spread his train when hens were approaching and twice as likely to fold it away when they left.
Makes sense.
Crucially, the train was never spread as a prelude to a fight with another male. Never.
Okay.
We also saw what's known as the hoot dash, a male's rather noisy pounce. While females often sprang away, sometimes it did lead to mating. This confirmed, unambiguously, that it was a performance designed for an audience of one.
An audience of one. Okay, this brings us to the groundbreaking work of Marion Keytree. Her research really delved into the million-dollar question. What exactly are peahens choosing?
The big question.
Yeah, her 1991 paper, with its incredibly direct title, Peahens Prefer Peacocks with Elaborate Trains, fundamentally changed the conversation.
Petree's methodology was meticulous, which made her findings so impactful. She and her team measured various body parts of over 100 birds and painstakingly counted the eye spots on photographs of their trains.
Counting eye spots, that must have taken ages.
I imagine so. But the clear insight from her work was that beauty in the peacock world isn't subjective, it's quantitative. Successful males consistently had more eye spots.
More spots equals more success.
Pretty much. And when a female was observed sampling several males before making a choice, on 10 out of 11 occasions, she mated with the one that had the most eye spots.
10 out of 11, that's pretty convincing.
It is. Petrie did note that peahens likely get a general impression, they're probably not sitting there counting all, 170 spots?
Right, just a general sense of wow.
Exactly. But the correlation was undeniable.
And this next point from Petrie's research is absolutely crucial for understanding the evolutionary implications. Peacocks, she emphasized, classically provide no resources other than seminal fluid to aid female reproduction.
Nothing else.
They don't courtship feed, they don't defend females. This means females are choosing based purely on genes alone. There's no nest, no food, no protection being offered.
That insight opened the door for direct experimental proof. Petrie, working with Tim Halliday, conducted an ingenious experiment where they actually cut out 20 of the outermost eye spots from some males' trains.
They snipped the spots, seriously.
They did. Just the outer 20. And what happened? These males subsequently achieved an average of 2.5 fewer matings compared to a control group whose trains were handled but not altered.
Wow. So it directly impacted their success.
It confirmed, unequivocally, that females prefer ornate and intact males. It was a direct, measurable impact of ornamentation on mating success.
And the plot thickens. Petrie took this a step further with an ingenious experiment in captivity. She found that the offspring of males with larger eye spots, meaning more spots, were the heaviest at 84 days old.
Healthier chicks.
Right. And even more compellingly, when some of these offspring were released into Whipsnade Zoo, those from males with the largest eye spots actually survived longer in the wild.
That's huge. This was the holy grail for the good genes argument, often associated with Alfred Russel Wallace.
Okay.
It suggests that by mating with attractive males with those more elaborate trains, females are literally gaining good viability genes for their offspring, genes that enhance their survival and health.
So it's not just about looking good.
It's about passing on something genuinely beneficial. Better survival chances.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting, and a bit complicated, though. Does this mean it's all about health? Adelaine Loyot's work in France added another fascinating layer to this mystery. She found that males with the fewest circulating antibodies in their blood, essentially the healthiest males, displayed the most and also got the most matings.
Okay, so health does matter. That fit.
It fits, but then Loyo went a step further with an immune challenge experiment. Males injected with immune-stimulating chemicals designed to mimic an infection displayed less. That makes sense. They feel sick.
Right, they're under stress.
But critically, those with more eye spots reduced their display the least under this challenge.
Ah, interesting. So the spots signal resilience.
Exactly.
Hmm.
It strongly suggested that eye spots act as an honest indicator of the health status of the male. Think of it as a costly signal only the truly healthy can afford to maintain such a grand display, especially when stressed. It supports Grafen's idea of a condition-dependent signal, like showing off how strong you are even when you're under pressure.
Precisely.
Loyu also analyzed another striking aspect of the display: iridescence, the shimmer.
Yeah, the colors.
She found that successful males had brighter eye spots whose color contrast changed most when the angle changed. So perhaps it wasn't just the number of eye spots that mattered, but their individual brilliance, their shifting dynamic sparkle.
The quality, not just the quantity.
Yeah.
That adds another dimension.
So the evidence seemed to be building for the train as an honest signal of health and vitality. Good genes, good immune system, looks great even under stress.
Things were looking clearer.
But just as researchers thought they were closing in on the answer, a truly unexpected finding emerged from Japan in 2008, threatening to dismantle everything we thought we knew.
Oh.
Mariko Takahashi and Mariko Hirawa Hasegawa's 7-year study found something startling. Neither train length, eye spots, nor train symmetry made much of a difference to mating success in their population.
Wait, none of those things?
Yeah.
After all that evidence?
None of them. Instead, only shivering frequency did. How fast they shook their feathers.
Just the shivering? That's really specific and different.
Totally different. And Takahashi and Hasegawa's controversial conclusion was that the Peacocks train might actually be an obsolete signal.
Obsolete.
Yeah, meaning female preference for its visual grandeur has already been lost or weakened, and that it's now maintained only as a threshold cue to stimulate females. Like, it just needs to be there. But the details don't matter anymore. They suggested that sexual selection might happen in bursts, implying this intense selection for the train may have happened in the past, but is no longer actively driving its size or ornamentation today.
Wow. That's a really challenging idea for the field. Sort of pulls the rug out.
It really does. Loyao and Petrie were quick to respond, of course. They acknowledged the possibility of past bursts of evolution, but argued that the train could have initially evolved through Fisher's runaway process, where a female preference for a trait, even if initially arbitrary, drives its exaggeration to extremes.
Right, the fashion feedback loop.
Exactly. And then it could have been maintained as a good genes indicator once that trait became costly to produce. So it could be both mechanisms working over evolutionary time. One starts it, the other keeps it going.
So not necessarily obsolete, but maybe its function shifted.
Perhaps. And just to keep us on our toes, Rosalind Darkin's studies in Canadian zoos further complicated the picture.
Oh, there's more?
Always more.
Yeah.
While her findings echoed some of the Japanese results, like no relation between train length or eye spots and mating success in some contexts.
Okay.
They also confirmed Petrie's earlier work that cutting eye spots did diminish success.
So cutting spots matters, but the number of spots maybe doesn't. That's confusing.
Right. It really highlights what's known as the leak paradox. If only a few males get most of the matings, and maybe there's not much difference between the winners anyway, how is this variation maintained over time for females to even choose from?
Yeah, if everyone's choosing the best, shouldn't the less good genes disappear quickly? Where does the choice come from later on? It's a classic evolutionary puzzle.
And the Hamilton-Zook theory of disease resistance, which suggests females choose mates based on their ability to resist parasites and disease, that was also tested.
How did that pan out?
Well, Petrie and Anders Meller found that some immune measures correlated with train size, but intriguingly not with eye spot number, which females seem to prefer.
So the part they seem to like isn't directly linked to the immunity measure they tested.
Exactly. It's what the Peacock is saying. It's complicated.
Definitely seems that way. Then came a particularly frustrating yet intriguing study on MHC diversity. That's a key part of the immune system, the genes involved.
Okay, MHC, immune genes.
It found that males with more diverse immune genes did indeed have longer trains, suggesting a link to good genes. That fits the theory.
Ah, okay. A link.
But in that specific study, train length didn't predict egg weight or number. So the good genes didn't seem to translate into better offspring outcomes in that instance.
Oh, for goodness sake. why these seemingly conflicting results across different studies, it leaves us with a fascinating, ongoing scientific question, doesn't it?
It really does.
So, after 40 years of intensive study, what do we know? We know peacocks leak, okay, that's clear. And we know females choose.
Yep, established.
But they have not definitively clarified why the females are so choosy. Is the train an obsolete relic of past selection, a mere threshold cue? Or is it a vivid and revealing indicator of a male's current health? Or perhaps was it one, then the other, through different evolutionary bursts?
We honestly don't know the full story yet.
We don't, and you know what? I love a good scientific mystery. It means there's still so much to discover. This brings us to another major unresolved question we just touched on. The leak paradox. If only a select few males get most of the matings, generation after generation, how is genetic variation the raw material for evolution maintained in the population?
The core paradox, yeah.
Mary and Patry, teaming up with theoretician Gilbert Roberts, proposed an incredibly intriguing mutator gene hypothesis.
A mutator gene. What's that?
Well, the mutator gene idea suggests there might be a gene that actually accelerates the rate of natural mutation elsewhere in the genome. Think of it as like a little engine of variation.
Okay, so it actively creates more diversity.
That's the idea. And in computer simulations, this gene thrived and spread only when female choice was present.
Only then.
Only then. It creates a powerful positive feedback loop. Female choice drives the spread of the mutator gene, which in turn generates more of the very variation that females have to choose from.
Wow, so female choice could actually be generating the diversity it needs to operate.
That's the fascinating concept. It could, theoretically, drive runaway evolution.
That's a mind-bending idea.
Isn't it? And if we broaden our perspective, there are even alternative non-biological explanations for the Peacocks train rooted in mythology.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
We have the Greek myth of Argos Panoptes, a giant with 100 eyes whose eyes were placed on Hera's peacock train after he died.
Ah, the all-seeing eyes.
Right. Or the Christian myth that the Peacocks train got its colors from the 7 deadly sins.
Huh. Interesting stories.
And, there's actually a smidgen of truth in these ancient tales if you think about it from an evolutionary perspective.
How so?
The eye-like ocelli on the train really do look strikingly like eyes.
They absolutely do.
And eye-like spots are common motifs in many animals. Think about the patterns on butterflies, moths, or fish, where they often act as frighteners to deter predators.
Right, startling predators.
This suggests that peacocks might be exploiting a pre-existing attention bias in peahens, an inherent visual attraction or response to eye-like patterns that was already there before the train got so huge.
So the females were already wired to notice eyes, and the males just ran with it.
Could be part of the story. This even leads to the intriguing idea that the display might temporarily hypnotize the peon.
Hypnotize. Wow.
And then there's Michael Ryan's sensory bias theory, which posits that females are attracted to exaggerated versions of displays that existed even before the full-blown stimulus. The preference might predate the elaborate trait itself.
Okay, so sensory bias theory helps explain what features get exaggerated, like why eye spots or a specific type of call might become more prominent.
Right.
However, it doesn't fully explain how that exaggeration itself evolves. That remains a fundamental, ongoing debate, doesn't it? That sort of battle between Fisher's runaway selection, where female preference fuels extreme traits.
The fashion trend idea.
Yeah. And Wallace's good genes arguments, where traits honestly signal health and viability. It's likely a mix of both, or different things at different times.
Now let's take a comparative deep dive. We've been talking about the Indian or blue peafowl, the one you typically see in parks and gardens globally.
A common one, yeah.
But there's another fascinating species, the green peafowl, found further east in Southeast Asia. Physically, they're distinct. A green neck, a scaly appearance, different colors throughout their body.
Very different look apart from the train.
Exactly. Yet the male train is almost identical to the blue peafowls.
And here's where it gets bizarre.
Yeah.
Almost nothing is known about the green peafowl's sex life.
Really, nothing.
Almost nothing. They are rare, incredibly wary, and notoriously difficult to study in the wild. Unlike the blue peafowl, no leks have been observed.
No leks at all.
Nope. Instead, the limited observations suggest they travel in small flocks, and males display singly at particular spots. A stark contrast in social behavior.
That's completely different. But fascinating genetic evidence is starting to fill in these gaps. A recent study from the Indian Institute of Science, Education and Research in Bhopal looked at the ZA ratio of genetic diversity on their sex chromosomes.
Okay, the sex chromosomes. Z and W in birds.
Right. Put simply, this ratio acts like a genetic fingerprint of a species' mating system. It can tell us if a few males are dominating breeding or if it's more evenly spread.
Clue to polygamy levels.
Exactly. And for blue peafowl, that ratio was much lower, screaming polygamy, strongly implying green peafowl might be monogamous, or certainly far less polygynous.
Wow, so the genes suggest the green ones are potentially monogamous, matching the lack of lax.
It fits the picture, yeah. And an even more striking genetic finding from the same institute. Blue peafowl have far more genes, nearly 26,000 coding genes, compared to just under 15,000 in green peafowl.
Whoa, that's a huge difference, almost double. Why?
This massive difference is likely due to gene duplication in the blue peafowl's history. Scientists attribute this to a genetic bottleneck in green peafowl about 20,000 years ago during the last ice age, which severely reduced their population and genetic diversity.
So the green ones lost a lot of genetic material.
Seems so. Blue peafowl, on the other hand, maintained larger populations and even benefited from human interaction, preserving their genomic diversity, including all those extra duplicated genes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
These genomic insights have profound implications, especially for conservation. The endangered green peafowl struggles to adapt, while the blue peafowl shows superior adaptability, potentially linked to those extra genes, particularly ones for neural development and opsins, which are key for vision. This hints at a greater sensitivity to sexual displays and visual discrimination in the blue peafowl.
So their extra genes might actually relate to processing those complex visual displays.
It's almost like their genes predispose them to evolve the very system we've been discussing. The lekking, the intense female choice.
That's incredible. So increasingly, it seems that to truly understand the behavior of a bird, or any animal for that matter, you really need to peek inside its genes. It's a whole new frontier in behavioral science.
It really is. This deep dive into the Peacocks strain has shown us a truly captivating scientific journey, hasn't it?
Absolutely.
It's a story of challenging long-held assumptions, uncovering layers of complexity, and revealing that even the most iconic examples in biology can hold persistent, beautiful mysteries.
It absolutely reflects the very nature of scientific progress. It's a dynamic process of sometimes conflicting results, ingenious experiments, and constantly evolving theories.
Yeah.
The final verdict on exactly why peahens choose remains elusive, and maybe it always will be to some extent, a testament to nature's complexity. But the journey of discovery itself is invaluable.
So what does this all mean for you, the learner? Perhaps the most striking displays, whether natural, like the Peacocks strain, or theoretical, like these evolutionary models, are the ones that keep us asking questions.
Right. They don't just give us answers. They ignite our curiosity.
They really do. And here's a final thought to mull over. If female choice, as that mutator gene theory suggests, can actually drive the creation of more genetic variation within a species, what does that imply about the powerful, often unseen influence of mate preferences on evolution, not just in peacocks, but in any species, including maybe our own?